we sent our briefers to the IAEA in Vienna to make the case for why this was a hidden facility. In North Korea, we provided full support to policymakers both before and after North Korea's nuclear and missile tests. But we have to do even better. We're working to gain greater insight into the leaders of these countries, the decision-making process that's involved, particularly when it comes to the issues I just discussed. When the stability of entire regions is at stake, no effort is too great. We have got to know both the capabilities and the intentions of all states that either have or aspire to weapons of mass destruction. Let me mention a third area that's becoming of increasing concern, which is the area of cybersecurity. The agency is working with partners throughout government to understand the threat from hackers, from foreign intelligence services, and from other adversaries that are trying to penetrate or disrupt vital computer systems. In my mind, the next Pearl Harbor could very well come from a cyber attack on our power grid, our financial centers, or our transportation systems. Cyber attacks are increasing in number and sophistication. Our operators and analysts are focused on trying to figure out who is targeting the United States in cyberspace. What systems do they want to infiltrate? What capabilities are they using to get at us? With that knowledge and understanding, our government can develop defenses and we can work to neutralize the threat. The last area I wanted to mention is that regarding global coverage in today's world. Counterterrorism, support to the military in the war zones, counterproliferation, cybersecurity are obviously high-profile, high-priority missions. But they only represent part of our responsibility. The agency must also provide global coverage. It must know the whole world. For example, we have to stay on top of developments in countries like China, Russia, India, Brazil, Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba, and nations from the Horn of Africa to Southeast Asia, from Latin America to Eastern Europe, from the Middle East to the Balkans. We've got to be prepared to handle simmering hotspots that suddenly boil over very quickly and can overwhelm policymakers. The conflict in Georgia in August of 2008 represents one of those examples. The coup in Honduras earlier this year represents another example of that kind of sudden conflict that can face us. At the same time, we've got to inform policymakers about potential crises down the road, problems that could result from demographics, from natural resource trends. Let me give you some examples. Consider the fact that 1 out of every 3 people in the developing world lives in a slum and is living in terrible poverty. The number of people living in those conditions is expected to grow by 50% to 1.5 billion in the next 15 years. So many more people with few educational or economic opportunities could worsen ethnic or religious tensions and increase social unrest. Another example, the number of people suffering from chronic hunger has risen to more than 1 billion, a 25% increase since the year 2000. This vulnerable group bears the brunt of rising food prices, as we saw last year. The jump in prices led to calls for more humanitarian aid, as well as protests and violence in a number of countries. Another area, climate change. Helping policymakers understand the national security implications of global warming is also a part of the CIA's global mission. We recently opened a center dedicated to this issue. Its charter is not the science of climate change, but the national security impact of things like rising sea levels, population shifts, and increasing competition for natural resources. The Center will provide support to policymakers as they negotiate, implement, and verify international agreements. And it will reach out to the academic world and to think tanks that are studying climate change. The objective is obvious. It's better knowledge and insight on a topic that is very worthy of our attention. The whole purpose here is to make sure we are not surprised. It's the CIA's charge to help policymakers foresee and understand and meet all of these challenges. Our focus on urgent threats and on these hard targets cannot leave us vulnerable to surprise anywhere in the world. After 8 years of intense focus on counterterrorism and support for the military, we have to be careful that we are not so focused on the obvious threats that we become vulnerable to the ones that are not so obvious. To confront this challenge, the CIA will do everything possible to ensure that we are a truly global service. We've got to develop stronger capacity to cover emerging regional powers. We've got to build deeper analytic bench strength in order to give the President advanced knowledges on these crises. And we've got to do more to collect and analyze information that is hidden from plain sight. And none of this is easy, and none of this is cheap. Given the current state of the federal budget, something that I'm very familiar with, as former chairman of the House Budget Committee and as director of the Office of Management and Budget, the CIA will have to find ways to accomplish its goals without some kind of big new infusion of funds. The agency must become more efficient in the way we operate. One of my goals is, frankly, to reduce our dependence on contractors by a total of 20%. This year alone, by doing that, we can produce savings of up to $100 million. With the help of the senior leadership of the agency, I've taken a comprehensive look at where are we today and where do we have to be in 5 years from now. As I said earlier, the goal is always to be one step ahead, identifying tomorrow's challenges and aligning resources to meet them. We intend to be clear about our needs in defending the country, but I also will insist that when the agency goes to the administration and the Congress for resources, that we can justify those requests with candor and with credibility. Much has been said and written in recent months about the agency's relationship with Capitol Hill. Let me give you my perspective. I cannot do this job without the support and partnership of the Congress. At a time of partisanship and distrust, more so than I've ever seen in the 40 years that I've been in Washington, every issue becomes part of a soundbite war. My goal must be to try to restore trust between the CIA and the Congress, both parties in the Congress. Having served in the Congress for 16 years, having worked with the Congress in a number of other capacities, I know the value of a solid relationship with the oversight committees. If the CIA is to have the resources and authorities it needs to accomplish its mission, lawmakers must understand what we do and have confidence in how we do it. At the best, oversight improves the agency, making it stronger and making it more effective. That's why I've spent a great deal of time and energy reaching out to the Congress and to many of my former colleagues. I need both parties, Democrats and Republicans, to support our mission. I cannot do this job alone. I need the support and trust of the Congress to establish the kind of partnership that they have to assume in protecting the national security. And finally, let me talk a little bit about the people at CIA. More than any of our strategic plans and initiatives, the single greatest influence on our agency's future will be the people who devote themselves to our mission. My job is to ensure that they have the skills, the tools, and the training they need to get this job done. Let me mention two areas of special emphasis. First, language training. As someone who represented an area that had the Defense Language Institute and the Monterey Institute of Languages, these are schools that provide important language training. And as a boy, during the time I was in Congress, I always felt that one of the things that, frankly, this country has not emphasized is language training. At the CIA, we have to have good language training for members of the CIA. I've announced a new program to increase language training, particularly for analysts and for collectors of intelligence.